Okay, good morning. Hemshech, Tzaddik, Dalet, page 119, 120. Yeah, page 120, which corresponds with Ayin Beis, page 1156, 1157. Okay. So yesterday we transitioned in the subject matter itself pretty quickly. I want to just slow it down a bit. And here's what we're discussing. We're giving the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, are explaining the nature of Oyer. We want to talk about Oyer, its role in Bittul. The Bittul of Heder Tfisas Mokim, of having no sense of self-value, a self, because it's connected and senses the atzmus, the source, and as such is nullified in that presence. At the same time, it is shalei be'erech from atzmus, as we learn from Ein Arech Lecha Be'elam Hazeh, from the Yesh, that atzmus is beyond everything. So to explain that, we've been explaining the difference between Ratzon and Seichel, two faculties. One which is an expression of the nefesh, and the other is a faculty of the nefesh. So though the faculty is also an expression, but it's not a full expression. Its role is not expressing the nefesh. Its role is a particular function that originates from the soul, which is to conceive and to understand ideas, intelligence. And in a rather relatively long explanation, explained that in two different ways. He explained how Ratzon is not chutz la'atzmus hanefesh, because all it is an expression of the nefesh, and that's its function, is to express the desire what the nefesh wants. Seichel is focused on its pu'ula, its function is the conceiving and understanding of ideas. So it's chutz la'atzmus hanefesh. Then he went on to explain that also in the process, in the systematic process of how faculties, so-called travel from the core to actualization. So there's the keiches atzmim, the keiches nalomim, and the keiches gluyim, three stages in general. So there too, seichel is a koyach nivdal. The way seichel emerges from the koyach hamaskil and the koyach heyulia atzmi of seichel is in a like removed fashion. Ratzon, on the other hand, is beisachdus, is connected. Now, we haven't yet gotten back to Ratzon, but that's what he stated back on the bottom of page 118, and then went to a whole discussion of how Seichel emerges from these higher levels. Two different ways. Or Yashar is a direct study of any subject matter, and there the Seichel is accessing and receiving intelligence from the Koyach HaMaskil. The Koyach HaMaskil is the Hamshach Nelama, like a Koyach Nelam. It's not yet Seichel, but it's already considered a mukar for Seichel, a source for Seichel. So that also comes through effort, because all Seichel comes through effort, as we learned. There's always Yigiyah on every level. But there, the Seichel reaches the Koyach HaMaskil. It accesses it. Then there's a deeper level of how we access and generate intelligence and ideas, and that's Erchezer. The example he gave was a person learning a subject matter, mastering it well, that's Koyach HaMaskil, that's Yashar. If he revisits the subject, the sugya, and asks questions and contradictions and halamas, and then digs deeper for answers, and he continues this process, which requires even more exertion than the initial exertion of learning it the first, the second, and the third time, as we said, then you're accessing now the Seichel Yulia Atzmi. And the example for that is like striking a flintstone, where you're accessing even deeper levels that are not even considered a flame. Koyach HaMaskil is like a hot coal with effort. By fanning it intensely, you draw out the flame. That's the mashal, in the nimshal, that by learning something with a measured effort, you draw out the flame from the koyach hamaskil, which in itself is in a more concealed state. It's not a perfect example because remember, koyach hamaskil doesn't have seichel in it. The coal does have a flame in it. But regarding which part of the mashal does fit here, the part that through fanning it, you draw it out, and that's that. When it comes to the flintstone, there are no sparks, there's no flame inside this flintstone. It's completely removed. You can't even call it a source for intelligence because it's seichel yulia atzmi, that's the nimshal. But through striking it, which is a very hard effort, a much more exertion necessary to strike flintstone than to fan a hot coal, that draws out those sparks. And the way it draws it out, like you said, the three differences, that number one, the flintstone does not have the existence of flame within it, where the coal does. Number two, the three differences. Number two, that that by the flame, the actual coal and the flame are two different things, and in the stone it's like one because there's no separate sparks. The spark is not existent there. So everything is like part of the stone. And number three, that by the coal, it comes out as a flame. And by the flintstone, it comes out as sparks. So we haven't yet discussed Ratzon yet, but going back to Seichel, I'm sorry, we haven't discussed the Erchezer. So going back to Seichel, then from there, and that's what I want to review a little more slowly now. Okay, now that that's been established, how Seichel works, now he's going to go back to the initial subject, why he began discussing this in the first place. This was not coming to explain how Seichel emerges from the deeper levels. It was coming to explain how Seichel is removed from them. So I want to just go back to, I'm on page 120. So after he gives the example of the flintstone and the coal, so just briefly, I'm going to sum this up now. I'm going to go a little more, as I said, slowly. It says, Yuvan. I'm reading the 6th line, but I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going quickly over the summary of it. It says, just like we just discussed, these two methods of how ideas are generated, how seichel, how intelligence is generated, or wisdom is generated. It's fine too. Which is compared to a hot coal and a flintstone, says the same thing we'll understand. In the general approach of Haskalah, of ideas, of intelligence, that comes through effort. Like we said, everything requires effort. Even the hot coal requires an effort. It's not just going to emerge, so you need effort. So everything requires effort. The first person who's just learning the sugya once or 3 times, but then he moves on to another subject, is also exerting effort to understand it well. But then he says, but in effort itself, there's 2 ways. And with this, he's answering the question at the beginning of the chapter. What's the difference between a Yasher and a Chezer? It's 2 different types of, everything is Yigiyah, but very different levels. One is a limited exertion, you can say, and the other is a far deeper and greater exertion. So Yigiyah Gufi is Bezefan. So one is a Yigiyah by understanding the Inyan through explanations, through different explanations and theories, one that evolve from one another, which is the process of learning. As you learn something, there's effort, you have to understand it, you explain it, different explanations. One explanation leads you to another explanation, what he calls Amishtal Shlem Zemizeh. I don't know if he means Maven Dover, Metech Dover. He doesn't use that, so I wouldn't use that word. Basically, the process of how the effort of understanding something requires this process of exertion. Beis, the second level of Yigiyah, is Hayigiyah de Kushis Perukim. That's already an effort that comes through questions and contradictions and counter arguments, which is the second individual who goes back to the subject and with questions. Here in this mashal, he's talking about 2 different people, but you could also have the same person have, let's say, a student that asks questions. So questions is not necessarily only coming if you yourself ask questions. That's the example he gave here just to make it a little more He gave that example. In Ayin Beis, he doesn't give the example of two different individuals. He basically says seichel, and then the questions that force you to go deeper into the subject in order to answer the questions. So that's the second level of Yegiyah. So with that,
Perukim means answers.
Two types of Yegiyah. Okay, and then he says, and then he concludes this piece and says, and these two methods, or these two approaches of effort, Yosher and Chezer, they access the two different roots of Seichel, with the Koyach HaMaskil and Koyach HaSeichel HaYuli Atzmi, which means, yeah, that's it, like you said before. So Yosher, the regular process of learning with explanations and understanding it, and the effort, like the hot coal, fanning the hot coal, that accesses the Koyach HaMaskil. Level 1, the Koyach HaNelam, the power of intelligence, which is already a Koyach, but it's not yet a Seichel. So it's already a Mocker, but it's not yet Seichel. And then the Chezer, the effort that is like the flintstone, striking the flintstone, which is through the questions and through the challenges, that you go deeper and like you strike the idea, so to speak, to the point that you get confused. He said, Kule Muksha, to the point it could be completely not understood once you start asking the questions, but then you dig deeper. So that is accessing the Seichel HaYulia Atzmi. Okay, so yesterday we just went straight into the next, but the truth is there should have been a pause. So this is the pause now. And now he's going to go back and explain the relationship between revealed Seichel and the Seichel, so to speak, in the coal and in the flintstone, in the moshel, in the Koyach HaMaskil and the Koyach HaYuli HaAtzmi, Seichel HaYuli HaAtzmi. Anybody wants to ask anything or comment? Please do so, and then we'll continue here. Okay.
You mentioned before Perukim. Perukim means answers.
I said it meant questions. Okay, fine. Kushya Perukim, right. Questions and the answering of those questions. Yeah, good. Fine. I just want to check something in Ayin Beis before we continue. Just give me a moment.
So which are we doing now? Are Yosha or Chayzer?
What do you
this
mean?
Class? As right now.
We just did both. Oh, you mean in this class itself?
Yes.
In me or in you?
I'm definitely just Aryashar. Is that what you're implying? And
well, look, when I'm teaching it, I guess I've already asked myself questions when I did learn this. So I've gone through an Chayzer to some extent. But very often the questions you guys ask force me and force us all to go deeper into the subject. So I think it's a combination. I mean, you can't really, like mentioned yesterday, if you don't have the Yosher in place, to start with Chayzer doesn't really work very well. First, you have to know what the subject says. You can't begin with questions. You have to begin with what are you teaching? What are we learning? And then we ask questions after. That's why I try to keep it paced. So I think it's a combination. Just give me a second moment. Okay, interesting. That's what I wanted to see. In Ayin Beis, on page 1156, right now, after he finishes with the coal and the flintstone and the two different methods, he goes now to how Seichel Goli, in revealed Seichel, revealed intelligence, revealed ideas, concepts, how it relates to the third level, the top level, in a way that they're separate from each other. Just like the flintstone doesn't have sparks in it until you strike it. So there's not even a flame there yet. And he also added there that the flame also is unlimited. The amount of sparks that can come out from a flintstone are unlimited. That's all from Keich Seichel Yulia Atzmi. And Seichel Goli from there is very distant. Then he adds in the parentheses, in truth, even Seichel from Keich HaMaskil, from like the coal, where there is a flame, it's concealed. And yet you fan it. And it's limited because at some point the coal will burn out. It says there, that also there's a nivdal, it's also separate from. The Frierdiker Rebbe, interestingly, and also logically in a way, reverses the order. He moves first from Seichel to Keich HaMaskil, and then he's going to talk about Seichel Yulia Atzmi. That's what I wanted to check. It doesn't change the pshat. It's just the order is changed. Frierdiker Rebbe is going, because and we can explain why, but I'd rather learn it first. Then I'll explain why I think the Frierdiker Rebbe changed the order. As I said, in the Havana, the understanding is the same. It's just the Rebbe Rashab focuses much more on the distance between the revealed seichel to the core root of it, which is embedded in the soul, the keich seichel hayuli ha'atzmi. And keich maskil is only in the parentheses. And here is going to go the other way, the order. So let's go with this order. We'll finish it. And then I'll share what I think is why, what we learned from this distinction, why the Rebbe Rashab did it this way and the Frierdiker Rebbe changed the order. But it's an interesting distinction. So here's what he says now. So now that we've established the way Seichel, the process, like he called the Chei Kavua, the Seder Mesudr, the organized structure or system of how intelligence and how ideas, I should say, flow from their root. So now he goes back. So what's the relationship between, as I said, the revealed to the core? And remember, this is the core faculty. We already established that Seichel itself is chutz la'atzmas hanefesh, because it's a particular faculty. We're now talking how Seichel relates to the koyach atzmi, the core faculty within the soul. So I'm going to read this again, even though we read it yesterday. It's worth reading again. She says like this. V'hainu. Okay, now that we've established the two things, okay, the two types, Yosher Chezus, he says V'hainu. This means the klolos koyach haseichel hu koyach shechutz la'atzma nefesh. The general power of, that once you asked me the question yesterday with wisdom and intelligence, I constantly hesitate whether I should call it koyach haseichel. I was calling it the power of intelligence, even though, as I said, it's semantics in a way. But I'm being more careful because I want to get the exact right word. Koyach haseichel, power of wisdom. I wouldn't call seichel wisdom. No, seichel is not wisdom. See, intelligence to me is like chachma bina das. Okay, maybe the power of the mind. But that's moyach. Moyach is the mind. Reish is the head, and seichel is what is in the mind. What's the best word to use? Anybody want to weigh in?
I really liked what he suggested, that intellect is process.
So maybe intellect may be the right word. Intellect. Did you say intellect?
That's what it sounded. That process of going through something to understand it. The intellect functions in a certain way.
See, seichel is a very broad word. Seichel, as we know, a child is born with seichel, with intelligence. Except it's not fully developed, like many things. And then through the effort of learning, we're drawing out. I'm just trying to find the right word. When you draw out seichel from the koyach hamaskil through effort, What would be the right English expression of that process? That's what I'm looking for, the exact right words. I'm not positive. Intelligence, wisdom, intellect, maybe. Intellect, ideas, maybe ideas even. I don't like ideas, it's limiting. Ideas like is rayonot. In Hebrew, ideas are rayon or a havrok, a concept, a scholar. Okay, we know what we're talking about. I just don't have the exact words. So, as I said yesterday, intelligence, wisdom, you can use. Generally you talk about lahachkim or lahaskil was conceiving. It's the best word for that, conception. Like chokhmah is to conceive of an idea, like the nukuda, the drop, the dot, the concentrated point of an idea. Bina, hasaga, lahasig or lahovin is usually to comprehend and to understand. But we're talking here the whole process. We're not breaking it between chokhmah and bina. So, okay, fine. Well, I'll keep working on it. I'll find the right words. But meanwhile, he's saying, now the klolos koyach haseichel, the power of intelligence or the power of intellect, hu koyach shachutz le'etzem hanefesh. He's going back to the original point on page 118. It's a koyach chutz. Again, chutz does not mean in physical space. It's not like the nefesh is here and the seichel is here. The seichel is obviously a faculty of the soul, but you can't say the seichel is the soul. The seichel is one particular function of the soul. Besides seichel, there's midas, for example, emotions. That's also chutz la'atzmus hanefesh. Ratzon, on the other hand, as we established, why is it not chutz? Because all it is like a garment for the soul's expression. Because ratzon to use your seichel or ratzon to use your midas, there you can't say ratzon, seichel, midas are all three equal faculties. It's not correct. Because the ratzon is the desire of the soul. What that desire is to use my seichel now, or the desire to express chesed or other emotion. So that's what he means. I'm just repeating it to make sure we understand what means chutz. So it's a particular faculty. We're going to obviously understand that Oyer Ein Sof is not like koyach haseichel, because Oyer Ein Sof is not a particular function. Oyer is a reflection of godliness. Atzmus has a lot more than Oyer, just like Nefesh has a lot more than Rotzen, as we'll learn. But from the point of view of Rotzen, all it is a selfless servant to the Nefesh. All Oyer is a selfless expression of Atzmus, whatever Atzmus wants to express there. Seichel is already is a particular function. Seichel would be Chochmah, Bina, Das. You can't say Chochmah, Bina, Das is Oyer Ein Sof. Oyer Ein Sof is actually even precedes Ratzon for all practical purposes, as we discussed. But for right now, Ratzon and Oyer are closer. So going back to this, it's a koyach chutz le'etzem hanefesh. V'hu koyach nivdol. And that's the second expression used. When you're talking about compared to the etzem hanefesh, it's chutz. When you're talking now as a koyach, what kind of koyach is it even in comparison to its source? Meaning the koyach atzmi hayuli, koyach haseichel atzmi hayuli, and koyach hamaskil. He's going to go now to koyach hamaskil. It's a koyach nivdol. In other words, it's removed from, a step away from the nefesh. Like the flame and the coal. The flame and the coal are not one. The flame there's the coal. The coal is a physical coal. A coal, when you ignite it, it has a flame. Like he said, if you remember the second difference, he says, and Beis dvorim. In the flintstone, it's not two things because there's no sparks inside the stone. Here, so now he says like this, Koyach nivdol, l'chein, hine gam hamtsos metzias haseichel mimkedei. So not only compared to the etzem hanefesh is the seichel a particular faculty, but also how metzias haseichel, our intellect, how the existence of intellect emerges. Hamtsos means, mimkedei means how it emerges from its source. Hamtsos sometimes in Hebrew means hamtsos means an idea, like a flash of an idea. But here hamtsos he means how mitzias. I'm trying to find again the English word. Emerges is a good word. There may be another word, but I don't have it right now in my tip of my tongue. So how seichel emerges from its moket. That's where he says lechene hine gam. Not just compared to the soul. What?
Hamtzoas Zustellung.
I don't think Hamtzoa means Zustel. Don't mean Hamtzoa meant wie der Metzias HaSeichel kommt da reis von. Okay, how it emerges from its source, who gam ken bederech nivdel memenu. So not only is it nivdel, not only is it chutz l'etzem hanefesh, which is already established because it's a particular faculty, but even as it emerges from the koyach hamaskil, or right now he says mibekede, from its source. He doesn't use the word koyach hamas. From its source, it's also in a way that's nivdel memenu, separate from it. Okay. And now he's going to explain, how do we know that? Because koyach hamaskil and seichel, the seichel knows that it's coming from somewhere, but it doesn't understand it. We don't understand the koyach hamaskil. We don't have any understanding of what it is, and we don't even have a sense of what exactly it is. We just know it's coming from somewhere. So now, and here's where we need to go a little slowly, because he's going to immediately compare it to a yesh that doesn't even know it's coming from somewhere. So, and the yesh, of course, is key to the whole subject matter. So this section here just brings together a bunch of things. That's why I wanted to do it a little slower, just to separate the ideas. So what we're going to say here is a few points that keep in mind. This will make it easier to appreciate the flow. We said it's chutz etzem hanefesh, fine. It's a nivdal, meaning seichel and the koyach hamaskil is what he wants to address now. What is their relationship with each other? On one hand, the koyach hamaskil is definitely a source for seichel. In addition, the seichel feels intellect. When we think of an idea, you don't say it came from no, you say it came from somewhere. You just don't know where it came from. Like you say, where did that come from? Like sometimes you have an idea, an answer to someone says, how'd you come up with that? You say, I don't know, it just fell into my head. You know, mazel machkim, or whatever the reason may be. So you know that it came from somewhere. It's clear, you feel it, but you don't feel where. So it's almost like an invisible source that's behind the curtain, which is actually an example used for many people when they talk about how conscious intellect becomes conscious. What was it like right before it became conscious, before the second before you became aware of it? Where was it? So what we Chassidus calls it the koyach hamaskil. It's behind the curtain, but not behind the curtain as an existing thing. You just open the curtain and you see it. It always remains somewhat mysterious. That's why we learn koyach ma. What is chochmah? Is koyach ma, the koyach of what? Because the seichel of chochmah, the idea that falls into our mind, is like ma. It came from what? What was that? Remember, we learned about the man. Why is the man called man? Because mohu. What is this? They know it came from somewhere, but they don't identify. It's a strange, like an alien. So it came from somewhere. Yes, that's clear. The man fell from heaven, and it fell on the dew every morning. So clearly they knew it came from somewhere, but you can't identify its source. That's what he's going to say now. Then he's going to compare it to a yesh, which doesn't even know it came from somewhere. And then, of course, there's the third level, which is ilah va'olol, where you not only do you know it came from somewhere, you actually can identify the source. So koyach hamaskil is and seichel is in between. You know there's a source, but you don't know what the source is. Then there's a yesh, doesn't even know there's a source, and then there's ilah va'olol, where yesh mi yesh. You're very clear. You take a piece of gold and you reshape it into a ring or to another ornament. It's very clear where it came from. It's no mystery. It's the process of taking one thing and shaping it to another. And the same thing I mentioned, let's say a reservoir of water that transmits water through water mains to homes and offices, and then you have pipes in your house and you turn on a faucet, you can trace it. You may not see it physically, but it's completely traceable. It's not a mystery. There are things, however, that you know there's a source, but the source remains somewhat elusive, if you wish. So therefore, seichel and reich hamaskel is be'efen nivdal. That makes it nivdal, because you can't directly link the two in a way that we can comprehend and relate to. So we're going to see from this, therefore, seichel is nivdal. Rotzen, in contrast, we'll soon learn, is not nivdal. But let's not jump. I just wanted to lay it out. So I'm going to continue reading now, and we'll read it inside. So he says like this. Because this is how it is with the sichlim, the ideas. Nimtsoyim, again, the word nimtsoyim, that emerged from the koyach hamaskel. Shem b'derech nivdal. They're in a removed way. They're somewhat separate. In other words, it's with a leap. It's coming from there, but nivdal means it's not a direct flow. There's so-called a type of invisible wall between them, between the conscious and the supraconscious. To put it in other words, shahare koyach hamaskel ein a musig. The koyach hamaskel is not understandable. It's not like we can comprehend or understand it. V'gam ein a murgish. Not only we don't understand it, we also don't feel it. You don't feel the actual koyach hamaskel when the ideas emerge from it. What do you feel? You feel that the seichel, the ideas, the intellect is being drawn from some source. You feel it's being drawn from some source, but you don't feel the actual source. And here's now going to explain that it's the middle ground. It's not like yesh, and it's not like ilav olu. This is what he's going to explain now, the contrast, to explain what means koyach nivdal. He says, we're not saying it's like something that emerges without a sense of a source altogether. That's the difference between a yesh, the existence of a yesh, meaning a created entity, creation, which senses itself as a yesh, and existence, and Metzias Seichel, and the existence of intelligence, or intellect, let's use. Shemetzias yesh, ein a margish klal, she yesh moker hamahave. Existence of a yesh does not feel at all that there's a mocker. Not only don't we feel the actual mocker, we don't even feel that we comes from somewhere. Again, we're not talking about when you say to yourself, "Ein dover esas satzme," nothing can create itself. That's an idea. That's a cognitive process. But you wake up in the morning, if you don't think about it, you don't say, "Oh, I'm coming from somewhere." When you say Moida Ani, you're acknowledging Shachzata bin Neshmasi, that my neshama returned to me. But you wake up in the morning, you don't feel like the neshama is coming down from heaven into your body. You wake up, you're up, and that's that. You're awake and you just continue your life as it was yesterday. Again, I'm talking about plain, pure, raw, primal feelings, not with any Aveda. Okay, so the Sheyesh Moker Amav. Umetzias HaSeichel, on the other hand, the existence of intellect, Margish Sheyesh Moker Ma'ayin Hu Nimshach. It feels there's a source from where it comes, from where it's transmitted. Aval Gam Zeh Eine Hergish Metzias Mekere. But also this is not that you feel the actual existence of the source. You don't feel and sense what the existence of the source. You just know there is one. You feel it came from somewhere. You feel like it dropped from somewhere. You don't know where it dropped from. And you don't feel, you can't identify the source. It's only that you feel that there is a source from where it came. Just to give an example in Avodah, may be helpful a bit. You know, we say, Birchas Hashem hi tashir, meaning it's God's blessing that makes one wealthy. Now, a person who's a Bal Amunah and knows that even though you make effort to make a parnasa, you can exert effort and you build a business or you work the field, yet you don't say to yourself, I did keichi ve'etzim yadi, this is my own strength, I'm a self-made man. You say, like the pasuk continues, Kim keiche shel, what's the lashon? Lekeich ve'etzim yadi asali yisachayel hazeh. Elo keach, what's the end of the pasuk there? Al kapanim, you acknowledge and you know it's the keich of Hashem that's manifesting through your keich. That's why the Gemara says, when it talks about the 6 different tracts, 6 different Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the 6 different tracts in Talmud, Gemara, Mishnah, and Gemara. So the first one is Zroim. So it says that they all hinted to in a pasuk, V'hoye emunas itecha. It starts, Amunah, he says, is Zroim. Why? What does Amunah have to do with planting, with the agricultural laws of the first Seder, which is all agricultural laws? There's a discussion why brachas goes in there, but you have Peya, Leka, you know, the Masechtas about agricultural. So it says, because Hamaimin, B'chei Elomim V'zereya. He believes in God, and then he plants. Which the chayre, 1 second. To plant a seed is a natural activity. You plant the seed, it makes things grow. What does that have to do with faith? But it's because he realized the whole thing is not my effort, that God gave me the koyach to which to manifest, to be a keli for God's blessing. So what in that case is like this. But then you have a person who says, no. This is me, I'm self-contained. These are the 2 ways a yesh can function in this world. I'm my self-made man. That's the yesh. It doesn't feel any source, doesn't recognize, it doesn't acknowledge. Through Avodah I'm saying, the yesh says, no, I believe and I come to work on myself, then no, this is coming from somewhere. The Gemara, the Zohar says, Rabbi Yanai, I believe, that before he ate a meal, the meal was in front of him. He would pray to Hashem to give him a meal. They say, what do you mean? There's a meal in front of you. Because he recognized that everything comes from the Yad Hashem. Even though he says the meal, the Eibishter can make it disappear or not be able to eat it, whatever it may be. I'm just pointing out in Avodah, because ultimately this comes down to that the yesh, you want the yesh to have bittul of oir. So oir is always aware of its source. There's no such thing as, no, I have a choice. Am I self-made or am I not self-made? The yesh is completely a yesh. And through Avodah it can come to recognize. The koyach hamaskil, seichel, is something in between. It senses that it comes from somewhere, but it doesn't recognize what it is, because it's a koyach nivdal. So it's in between. Anyway, just wanted to elaborate a bit to give it a little more, the relevance of it all. Okay. So again, margish yesh mokim ma'ayin hum nimshach, aval gam ze ein hergish mitzias mekei ve'en l'mashem margish yesh mokim shamesham nimshach. Which of course is something. It means seichel recognizes, intellect recognizes there is a source. It just doesn't sense what the source is and doesn't understand, doesn't relate to it. V'chein, going now be'etzem misavus ha'seichel. And the same is with the etzem, with the core formation, if you wish, or the coming into being of intellect, of ideas. Hainu mitzias ha'seichel. The existence of intellect. Hari einze al yidei hergish mekere. It's not through feeling the mocker. It feels that there is a mocker, but does not feel the actual mocker. And now he goes the other extreme. Remember I said the other way, Let's find an example of something that actually feels its mucker. We talked about yesh does not feel its source at all. Doesn't even feel there is a source. We talked about seichel that feels there's a source, but it doesn't feel the actual source. But now he's going to say something that feels the actual source. He says, the zeo hefresh ben seichel le'ila v'alu. This is the difference between how intellect emerges and ila v'alu. Ila v'alu is a very common expression in Chassidus and Sifrei Chkira. Ila v'alu means cause and effect. Now, we know many things can be in a cause and effect, but generally ila v'alu, the way he's going to explain it now, is a cause and effect that relate to each other. So he's going to say it like this. The be'ila v'alu, when cause and effect, remember, koyach hamaskil and seichel is also cause and effect technically. But it's not ila v'alu that we usually use, which means the cause and effect that are commensurate to each other. So he says, in ila v'alu, harisavas ha'olu, hu aidei gili v'kira ve'ila. The creation or the emergence or the presence of a olu, an effect, is through the revelation and the kiruv of the ilah. The cause is revealed and comes close to, relates to the effect, and that's why you have cause and effect. If I take a flame and I want to light another flame, just a simple example, there's only one way to do it. I have to take the master flame, bring it to the candle and the wick, and light it. So it's both revealed and bekiruv. I can't stand 10 feet away and expect that there's going to be an effect that the flame is going to be lit. So there's a revealed and close, not like koyach hamaskil and seichel, as we'll discuss in a moment. That's ila v'alu. V'savas ha'seichel milamayla min ha'seichel. By contrast, the emergence or the coming into being of intellect from lamayla min ha'seichel, meaning the source of seichel, that's beyond actual revealed conscious faculty of the mind, hu al derech bri yesh ma'ayin, al derech. Remember, it's not exactly yesh ma'ayin because we already made this clear that yesh doesn't feel it even has a source altogether. And seichel does feel it has a source, doesn't feel, but in comparison to the ila v'alu, seichel and koyach hamaskil is like yesh ma'ayin. Ma'ayin as an ayin hamusig. Like we said, that chokhmah is koyach ma, and ayin, like it doesn't know where. When you say ayin, where was that from? So I just have to clarify that because we just said it's not like the yesh. So why does he say now bri yesh ma'ayin? Because when you compare it to ila v'alu, where it's yesh mi yesh, meaning one yesh is the cause of another yesh, then Chassidus in Tanya, he explains in the beginning of Perek Beis, other places, that, for example, a potter makes a pot out of clay. He takes clay and shapes it into a pot. Same thing, a goldsmith. Same thing, any type of really craftsperson. That's ila v'alu in every possible way. Here's the raw clay, here's the shaped clay. Here's the potter. It all has to be through kiruv and gili. That cause and effect will not happen from a distance or from some concealed state. So obviously the potter has a skill, but he has to apply himself. That's generally ila v'alu. Ila v'alu, I believe, I don't know if he brings it here, but in Ayin Beis, he brought seichel and midas as ila v'alu. When you contemplate an idea, let's say that you start thinking about the greatness of God, and it gives birth to a midah, now you want to get close to God. Or you concentrate on somebody, on a neshama of a person, and it brings avos Yisrael. That's ila v'alu. Why is it ila v'alu? Because the contemplation is directly impacting the midah. It speaks to it. The intelligence, the idea, is affecting the midah. I'm not getting now into analysis of the midah knows what seichel exactly is, but they speak to each other. It happens all the time. The mind talks to the heart. The heart talks to the mind as well. Sometimes our emotions affect our mind. But we're talking about the usual, the healthy, the process the way it's meant to be. Love. Okay. So, whatever example you want to use, but when it comes to koyach hamaskil and seichel, there it's more like yesh ma'ayin. Okay. So this, he spoke about seichel and koyach hamaskil. Now he's going back to the koyach haseichel ha'atzmi ha'yuli. He says, ubefrat. Now, what we just said, that there's an havdalah, there's some type of separation, partition between conscious intellect and the koyach hamaskil, the superconscious, from where it emerges, which means it senses there's a source, but it does not know what the source is like and does not feel the actual source. It just knows it came from somewhere. He says, ubefrat. When you now compare seichel goli to the koyach seichel hayuli ha'atzmi that comes through the yigi of chezer. Now he's bringing back the chezer. He says, ubefrat, hamtzos mitzias hasichlim. The emergence or the discovery, hamtzah could also be like discovery if you wish, not mamish, of mitzias hasichlim, of the existence of ideas. Mekoyach hamaskil hayuli ha'atzmi. Now he's going to he's calling it koyach hamaskil here. Interestingly, the Rebbe does not correct it. In Ayin Beis, they changed maskil to seichel in the footnote. Because till now, koyach hamaskil was the second level. Now he's combining maskil with seichel yulia atzmi. So, which you could say, you could say koyach hamaskil. There's the koyach hamaskil that's a mocker, like a koyach nelam. And then there's a koyach hamaskil as it's within the seichel yulia atzmi. Since the Rebbe did not correct it here, I guess you could say there's two levels in the koyach hamaskil. Even though in the seichel yulia atzmi we know it's not called koyach hamaskil, because he said clearly it's not yet even a mocker for seichel. But he just mentions it. I'm just pointing out. He says, and this is actually the same language in Ayin Beis, but they didn't know about Tzaddik Dalet, so I think they just corrected it. I just want to make sure. Yeah, hamaskil. Yeah. So maybe that correction they made, that was just made by the people who prepared it for print. Maybe wrong, that correction. Okay. So he says like this. But by saying hayuli atzmi, which is the higher level, the third higher level, shein b'derech nivdal mina etzem. These sichlim, even from the koyach hamaskil, which is level 2, the nelam, the concealed level, it's also nivdal and removed, because as I said, you can't sense what the actual source is. But specifically, if you go even more so, compared to the top level of the seichel yuli atzmi, these sichlim shehein. So it's Lashon Rab. He's talking about these sichlim that emerge in the conscious intellect. They're removed from the etzem. And here, b'pashtus, he means etzem, the koyach yuli atzmi. Because when it came to etzem hanefesh, he called it chutz le'etzem hanefesh. When it came to koyach yuli atzmi, he called it nivdal. Okay. Vashar alkein. And due to this, and it is due to this, hayegia b'derech er yosher. The Rebbe corrects below that it should say er chezer. Yeah, which is a toz de muchach, because he's going to say it comes through striking it. So er yosher has to be changed to er chezer. The Rebbe corrects it on the bottom. The footnote. So he says that, and therefore, the effort, the exertion, in the form of the refractive light, dafke, shukein hakah, which is like similar to striking the flintstone. In here case, which is like striking b'koyach meitzi amkei haskolim and mekeda v'shosha atzmi. Listen, how does he read the? How does the nigun go here? Oh no, I read it wrong. Let me reread it. And therefore, and because of this, or due to this, the exertion b'derech chazer, dafke. Dafke the chazer, the added exertion, not the regular exertion when it flows from in the regular fashion, but chazer through questions and through challenges and concealments and so on. Shu ke'en hakah, which is like striking it, and here's how the nigun should go. Bekeach, shaydei hakah bekeach, that's like striking it with the strength, or maybe bekeach means it has the power. Bekeach, no. It's like striking something with intensity, with bekeach, with a strong striking. It draws out the depth of the idea from the source and root, its core source and root. In other words, what he's saying is very straightforward. Why do you need to strike it? Why can't you just draw out the sparks from the flintstone? The answer is because it's not there in any revealed way. When you're talking about a coal, we're going to learn this in a minute, but I just want to spell it out. A coal, the flame is there. You just don't see it. And you can't benefit from it. So you need to fan it. But when you're talking about something that's not there in any existent way, you need to strike hard to access something so deep. In the nimshal, when it's a regular idea, you're learning a sugya, okay, you make your effort, you're fanning essentially the muscles of your brain, of your mind, and you're exerting yourself to understand the idea. So the mind has the potential, now you're drawing it out. But if you want to go deeper and you want to access deeper insights, it's not possible regular because it's just not there. So only way is through tremendous exertion, through questions, through challenging, which is like ke'en hakah. You're striking the idea. The idea was understood. Leave it alone. No, but you want to understand it deeper. So the only way is to tear it apart in order to go deeper. And that striking is able to elicit the sparks within the flintstone. And here, that so-called power, potential, core, essential seichel in the seichel hayuli atzmi. So it's clearly a koyach nivdal, because the whole reason why did you have to strike it if it was not nivdal? Like yesh mi yesh, you don't have to do anything to strike. You just draw it from one flame to the next flame. Even in a coal, you fan it. And in a flintstone, why do you have to strike it? Because it's not there without striking. That tells you that it's nivdal. The seichel goli doesn't have it until you strike through questions. It's only when you go and challenge it that you're able to draw out that seichel. So that tells you that the seichel agoli is removed from the seichel ha'atzmi, even more than the koyach hamaskal. So essentially what he's saying right now. Okay, and he continues. Now we understand, I think, why did he have to go this whole elaboration? Because this tells us how distant they are. So he says like this now. The kol zeh b'koyach haseichel shu koyach nivdal. And all this is in the power of intelligence or intellect, which is again a removed faculty from the nefesh and etzem koyach hayuli and koyach hamaskal. Hari his galus asichlim hu ayidei koyach nivdal. The galus asichlim, the revelation of ideas, coming, in other words, from is through a koyach nivdal, through a faculty that's not the nefesh itself, through some like so-called something that is considered like outside of the nefesh, separate. Ke'ein hafochiv akah, like blowing on it, fanning it, and striking it. When you fan a flame, why is the coal not giving you the flame on its own? Why do you have to fan? You need a koyach outside of the coal to fan it to get the flame. Same thing with the koyach hamaska. You need yigia, not the deepest yigia, but you need some effort to get seichel out of the koyach hamaska. And even more so when you strike it. Why doesn't the flintstone just give off sparks? You need an outside koyach nivdal to draw it out. So basically he's saying now something even further. That koyach haseichel is like a outside faculty that through the effort that you exert, you are drawing out a flame from the coal through yashar and sparks from the flintstone through chezer. So it's a force outside of the actual soul to be able to do that. Why do you need yigia? Because yigia, why can't the soul just give you all this without any effort? Because it's effort from the outside, so to speak, but the question here, the effort is clearly from the outside. But the koyach haseichel itself, that we're born with that. So I guess he means the active koyach haseichel. When you activate it, it has to have some effort. Like he said, you have to have effort for every idea that you learn, that you conceive. Everything, every seichel needs some yigiyah. Maybe minimal, but you need something. So I guess the koyach haseichel agoli is a koyach nivdal, and it's activated through yigiyah, and that draws out from the soul the different levels, whether it's yashar or chezer, different levels of intellect. That's what it sounds like he's saying. Yeah, as we spell it out. I think I'm going to stop here. Yeah, we'll stop here because now the next line is Mashenken Koyach HaRotzen. Now we're going to contrast it with the power of desire, Rotzen, which of course is really where he wants to go to. And as you see on page 121, that's where this subject will end. And he's going to move to the second level of Bittul and we'll go back to Ayin Beis. So we'll stop here. Does anybody have any questions, any comments? I could tell you this, reading it through the Frierdiker Rebbe's explanation definitely adds a whole dimension. Some things here that we've discovered that wasn't so obvious when we read it in Ayin Beis. But now it's coming much clearer why he brings the whole chezer, because that's what I was thinking a lot. I thought maybe it's about the Aveda of it, but it seems to be because the chezer really teaches us how far apart. It still doesn't negate what we spoke about, but I'm just saying a lot more details are emerging here. So anybody want to ask anything? I hope it's exercising your brain muscles. Definitely plenty challenging, but it's deep stuff. It's very good stuff here, right? No comments? Okay, fine, good. It's good to absorb. Just looking into Ayin Beis to see. Yeah. Yeah, he explains the whole Ayin